I never thought this would happen to me. I mean, seriously, you hear about stories like this in movies, in those over-the-top reality TV dramas, or maybe in some crazy Reddit post. But it's never someone you know. It's never you. And then one day it is. I remember sitting alone that night, staring at my phone, my mind racing with a million thoughts, but unable to process a single one. My hands were trembling, my chest felt tight, and my stomach was in knots. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears like a drum. I kept blinking, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this was all some twisted mistake. But no, the truth was staring right back at me. And the worst part? It wasn't just some random guy. It wasn't even a close friend. No, it was my own brother. Do you know what it feels like to have your entire world collapse in a matter of seconds? 1 minute, you think you have it all. A stable marriage, a loving wife, a family bond that can't be broken. And the next, everything turns to ash. That's exactly what happened to me. It's like one of those slow-motion moments in a horror movie where the main character walks into a dark room, knowing something terrible is about to happen, but they just can't stop themselves. That was me. Except this wasn't a movie. This was my life. At first, I didn't believe it. I couldn't. It's funny how the human brain works, how it protects you from the truth, even when it's staring you right in the face. I kept making excuses. Maybe I misread something. Maybe there's a logical explanation. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. But deep down, a small voice inside me was screaming. I knew something was wrong. And that's when the memories started flooding back. Small moments that I brushed off, red flags that I ignored, because why would I ever suspect them? Why would I ever think my own brother would do something like this to me? I should have seen it earlier. The way she started dressing up more than usual. The way she suddenly became busy all the time. The way my brother started acting different, distant, yet strangely present. Like he was hiding something. The way they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. But I was looking. I just didn't want to believe what I was seeing. You ever get that gut feeling? That sick, sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach that tells you something is very, very wrong? That feeling hit me like a freight train. And once it did, there was no going back. My mind started connecting the dots, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had been living in a lie. But here's the craziest part. The way I found out, it wasn't just some accidental slip-up. It wasn't a misplaced text or a suspicious phone call. No. It was so much worse. It was the kind of thing that haunts you, the kind of thing that plays over and over in your mind, like a scene from a nightmare you can't wake up from. Because trust me, if you ever catch your wife cheating, you never forget that moment. Ever. And I promise you what happened next. It's going to shock you to your core. At first, it was nothing. Just little things. Small changes in her behavior that, on their own, didn't seem like a big deal. But that's the thing about betrayal. You never see it coming, not at first. It starts as a whisper in the back of your mind, a tiny crack in the foundation, something so subtle that you convince yourself it's just your imagination. And that's exactly what I did. I ignored it. It started with her staying out late. Not crazy late, just an extra hour or two. She told me it was work, meetings, just catching up with some friends. At first, I believed her. I mean, why wouldn't I? But then I noticed the way she started dressing up more than usual. New outfits, extra effort in her makeup, perfume I had never smelled before. When I asked about it, she brushed it off with a smile. I just felt like looking nice today, she'd say. And I, like an idiot, just nodded and let it go. But then came the phone changes. She started keeping it face down on the table. All the time. Before, she never cared if her phone was lying around, but now, it was glued to her. Bathroom? She took it with her. Sleeping? It was tucked under her pillow. And the notifications, they just stopped. No more random texts popping up on the screen. No more late-night messages from her coworkers. Just silence. And that silence was louder than any alarm bell, I had ever heard. Still, I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe she just wanted privacy. Maybe she was just tired from work. Maybe. But then something happened, and this time, I couldn't ignore it. One night, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, waiting for her to come home. She had texted me earlier saying she was grabbing dinner with the girls and would be late. No big deal, right? But then my brother texted me, out of nowhere. Just a casual, hey, what's up? Nothing unusual on the surface, but something about it felt off. Why? Because my brother never texted me first. Ever. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I glanced at the time. It was nearly 11 p.m. That's when something inside me clicked. My wife was supposed to be out with her friends. My brother never texts me this late. And suddenly, all those little things, the late nights, the extra effort in her appearance, the phone secrecy, they weren't so little anymore. They were pieces of a puzzle, and I was starting to see the picture they were forming. I responded to my brother's text, trying to act normal. But as I typed, I felt this deep, gut-wrenching unease. I decided to test something. I casually asked, "Hey, what are you up to tonight?" And his response? Just chilling at home, nothing much. Simple, straightforward. But here's the thing, something didn't sit right with me. So, I did something I had never done before. I checked my wife's location. My hands were shaking as I opened the app. My heart was pounding in my chest, like a warning, like my body already knew what my mind refused to believe. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to load. And when it did, my breath caught in my throat. My wife's location? It wasn't at a restaurant. It wasn't at some bar with her friends. No, she was somewhere else entirely. She was right near my brother's apartment. I just sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, my mind racing. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe she was just passing by. Maybe she had a good reason. But deep down, I knew. I knew something was very, very wrong. And that's when the whisper in my head, the one I had been ignoring for weeks, turned into a scream. You ever get that feeling in your gut? That deep, nagging feeling that something just isn't right? That was me, sitting alone in my living room, staring at my phone, waiting for a text, a call, anything. She told me she was working late again. It wasn't the first time. Lately, it had become a pattern. Late meetings, extra shifts, last-minute deadlines, all the usual excuses. And every time, I swallowed them down like bitter pills, convincing myself that everything was fine, that I was just being paranoid. But that night, something felt different. Something felt off. I checked the time, 10:47 p.m. She was supposed to be home over an hour ago. I sent her a quick text. Hey, everything okay? No response. I waited a few minutes, tried calling. One ring, two rings, straight to voicemail. Weird. She always answered, even if just to say she was busy. I told myself maybe she was in a meeting. Maybe her phone died. But my chest felt tight. My gut was screaming at me that something was wrong. And then my phone buzzed. A message. My heart jumped. But when I looked at the screen, it wasn't her. It was my brother. Hey, what's up? Just 3 words. Casual. Normal. But in that moment, something about it sent a chill down my spine. Why was he texting me out of nowhere at this exact moment? He never texted me first. Not unless he needed something. And tonight? Tonight, he had no reason to check in on me. Unless he knew I was alone. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. My instincts were firing on all cylinders now, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. So I played it cool. I responded. Not much, just waiting for wife's name to get home. She's working late again. 3 dots appeared. He was typing. And then nothing. The dots disappeared. No response. That's when my stomach dropped. I waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. My mind started spinning. Why would he text me out of the blue? Only to vanish as soon as I mentioned my wife. Was it guilt? Panic? Did he know something I didn't? Or worse, was he with her right now? I felt my pulse in my throat. I couldn't sit still. My hands were clammy, my breathing shallow. Every little thing from the past few weeks started replaying in my head like a horror movie montage. The late nights, the secrecy, the way my brother had been acting weird lately, distant, yet strangely present. I told myself I was overreacting, that this was all in my head, that I was just imagining things. But deep down I knew this wasn't a coincidence. This was a sign, the first real, undeniable sign that my life was about to fall apart. At this point, my mind was a battlefield. I was caught between two voices, one telling me I was just being paranoid, that I was overthinking everything, and the other, louder voice screaming at me, something is wrong. Find out the truth. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every red flag, every weird coincidence. But coincidences don't pile up like this. Not without meaning something. Not without leading to the truth. I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. And I knew just how to get it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dude, this is extreme. And yeah, I won't lie, it felt crazy. But desperate times call for desperate measures. And this wasn't just some silly insecurity. This was my marriage, my family, my entire life. And I had to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I put an AirTag in her car. It was easier than I expected. Late at night, while she was in the shower, I grabbed the tiny tracking device, walked out to the driveway, and carefully slipped it into a hidden spot under the passenger seat. My hands were shaking the entire time. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she might hear it from inside the house. But I did it, and once that little device was in place, I knew there was no turning back now. The next night, I waited. She told me she had another late meeting. I acted normal, played along, even kissed her goodbye as she grabbed her purse and walked out the door. But inside, I felt like I was on fire. My pulse was racing, my palms were sweaty, and the second that front door shut behind her, I sprang into action. I grabbed my phone, opened the tracking app, and there it was, a tiny blue dot moving in real time. My wife's car. I watched as she drove down the street, out of our neighborhood, heading toward what? Work? A friend's house? Somewhere else entirely. I sat there, staring at the screen, my thumb hovering over the refresh button, waiting. My mind was spinning with possibilities. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she really was working late. Maybe in 5 minutes, that little blue that would land right outside her office building, and I'd breathe a sigh of relief, laugh at myself for being so ridiculous. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't going to happen. Because when someone is lying to you, when someone is hiding something, you can feel it, even before you see the proof. And that proof? It was about to hit me like a train. And where that little blue dot finally stopped, let's just say it changed everything. I sat there, staring at my phone screen, barely breathing. The little blue dot that represented her car had stopped moving. It wasn't at her office. It wasn't at a restaurant. It wasn't at a friend's house. No, it was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere it had no reason to be. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight, I felt like I might throw up. I zoomed in on the map, my hands trembling. The address looked familiar, but my brain refused to process it at first. And then it hit me. This was my brother's apartment. I blinked, stared harder. Maybe I was wrong? Maybe the GPS was off by a block? Maybe she was just passing through the area? My mind was scrambling for excuses. Any excuse to explain what I was seeing. But the reality sat there on the screen, cold and undeniable. Her car was right there, parked, not moving. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. A sickening mix of adrenaline, panic, and disbelief surged through me. No, this couldn't be happening. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe she was visiting him for some reason. Maybe she needed something. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I already knew. I tried to breathe, but every inhale felt like swallowing broken glass. I could feel my hands clenching into fists, my nails digging into my palms, my body stiff with tension. My mind was spinning, trying to piece together the fragments of the past few weeks. The late nights, the excuses, the distant looks, the way my brother had been acting strange, the way he texted me that night as if to check if I was home. Was this it? Was this the truth I had been trying so hard not to see? I told myself not to jump to conclusions. That's what crazy, jealous people do, right? They assume the worst, they don't think rationally. I needed proof. Real proof. Seeing her car, there wasn't enough. But it was enough to make me want to see for myself. I grabbed my keys. My body was moving before my brain could catch up. My heart was hammering. My vision felt like it was narrowing, but one thought was pulsing through my head louder than anything else. I need to know. As I drove, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every red light felt like an eternity. My mind kept flipping between rage and denial. 1 second, I was furious, picturing the worst. The next second, I was convincing myself that there had to be another explanation, that I was about to embarrass myself for thinking something so insane. But if I was wrong, why did my chest feel so tight? I turned onto my brother's street. The second I saw her car parked right outside his building, my stomach dropped. There it was, sitting there, like it belonged, like it had been there before. My fingers curled around the door handle, but I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the car, my pulse hammering in my ears. Part of me wanted to storm inside and demand answers. Another part of me didn't want to know, didn't want to see what was waiting for me on the other side of that door. Because once you see something, you can't unsee it. And I had a sinking feeling that whatever I was about to find was going to destroy me. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I stepped out of my car. My fingers were ice cold despite the heat pulsing through my body. My heart? It wasn't just pounding. It was slamming against my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears, a deafening drumbeat of fear, anger, and something even worse, dread. I stood there for a moment, staring up at my brother's apartment building, my breath shallow, my mind screaming at me to turn around, to leave, to pretend I never saw her car parked outside. Because if I walked up those steps, if I saw something I couldn't unsee, there would be no going back. My world, my entire life would never be the same again. But I had to know. I had to see it with my own eyes. I forced my feet forward, every step feeling heavier than the last. The closer I got, the more the air felt suffocating, thick like smoke. I was hoping, praying, that when I got there, I would find something, anything that made sense. Maybe my brother had invited her over to talk about something. Maybe she was just dropping something off. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. But the second I got close enough to his window, I knew. Through the dimly lit glass, I saw them. My wife, my brother, sitting across from each other at his small kitchen table, laughing, like nothing was wrong, like everything was normal, like they weren't ripping my heart apart. There were 2 wine glasses in front of them, half empty. The bottle sat in the middle of the table, condensation dripping down its side, untouched by the weight of betrayal that hung in the air. I felt like I was drowning. My vision blurred for a second, my breath hitched in my throat. I wanted to bang on the window, to scream, to storm inside and demand answers. But I couldn't move. I could only watch. And then it happened. She reached across the table, placed her hand on his, slowly, intimately, the way she used to hold mine. I clenched my fists so tightly, my nails dug into my palms, but I couldn't look away. My brother leaned in, whispered something to her, and she giggled. A soft, affectionate giggle, a sound that had once been mine. And then, as if the universe wanted to make sure I felt the full weight of my destruction, she stood up, walked around the table, and just like that they kissed. Not a friendly peck, not an accident, a real, slow, lingering kiss. His hand slid up her back, pulling her closer, while hers tangled in his hair. It was passionate, comfortable, like they had done this before. Like this wasn't new. Like this had been happening for a long, long time. Something inside me snapped. My whole body felt numb, but my chest burned with something between rage and agony. My breath came out in short, sharp bursts, like I had been running, but I hadn't moved at all. I was frozen, watching my own wife melt into the arms of my own brother. The betrayal was so sharp it physically hurt. My hands were shaking. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might break. My head was spinning, my pulse erratic, and yet I just stood there. I should have stormed inside. I should have confronted them right then and there. But I didn't. I just watched, as my entire life crumbled in front of me. I don't remember making the decision to move. 1 second, I was frozen outside that window, watching my world collapse, and the next, I was charging up the stairs. My blood was boiling. My vision had tunneled. I could barely hear anything over the roaring in my ears, pure, unfiltered rage coursing through my veins like fire. My fists were clenched so tightly my knuckles had gone white. My whole body was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was from fury. I reached his apartment door, and, without thinking, without hesitating, I kicked it open. The door slammed against the wall with a loud bang, rattling the cheap picture frames hanging in the hallway. Inside, the scene ripped through me like a knife. There they were, my wife, my own brother, still tangled up in each other, their bodies too close, their hands where they shouldn't be. The wine glasses were still half full, the air still thick with the scent of her perfume, a perfume she used to wear for me. For a split second, everything went silent. They hadn't noticed me yet. My wife was still smiling, her fingers grazing his jawline, whispering something in his ear. And then she saw me. Her face drained of color. She gasped, her body jerking back like she'd just been electrocuted. My brother? He jumped to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor, eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. Guilty. Caught. Trapped. And then, before I could stop myself, before I could even register my own voice, the words exploded out of me. What the hell is this? The room cracked open with my fury. My voice came out raw, sharp, like a blade slicing through the thick, suffocating air. My chest heaved. My heart was a hammer against my ribs. My fingers twitched at my sides, aching to hit something, to hit him. My wife's lips parted, but no words came out. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the table, as if the wood beneath her fingers could somehow save her from what was about to happen. My brother, my own flesh and blood, stammered. His mouth opened and closed, struggling to find words, to come up with some pathetic excuse. And then he said it. Bro, it's not what it looks like. Time stopped. For a split second, I just stared at him, my brain unable to process the sheer audacity of those words. Not what it looks like. Not what it looks like. My vision blurred with rage. My pulse pounded so violently I could barely stand still. Are you fucking kidding me? My voice came out hoarse, almost unrecognizable, shaking with so much hatred I barely felt like myself anymore. I pointed at them, at the very thing they were trying to deny, my whole body shaking. I just saw you. I saw you. Don't you dare stand there and lie to my face. My wife finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. It's not what you think. I laughed. A short, Sharp, bitter laugh that tasted like poison. Oh, really? I took a step forward, my hands balling into fists. So, what exactly do I think is happening here? Please, enlighten me. Silence. Deafening, suffocating silence. She looked down. My brother looked away. And that's when I knew they weren't sorry. Not for what they had done. Not for the months of lies, the stolen moments behind my back. They were only sorry because they had been caught. Something inside me snapped. I lunged at him. My brother barely had time to react before my hand slammed into his chest, shoving him backward. He stumbled, knocking over a chair, cursing under his breath. My wife screamed, stepping between us, her hands on my chest, trying to push me back. "Stop it, please," she cried, but I barely heard her. My blood was thunder in my ears. My vision was nothing but red. I turned to her, my voice low, dangerous. "How long?" She flinched. Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. "How long?" I roared, the walls shaking from the force of my voice. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. She didn't deserve to cry. She didn't deserve to feel pain. Not when she had caused mine. Not when she had ripped my heart apart and handed the pieces to my own brother. And then, barely a whisper, she said it. The words that broke me. A year. Everything inside me collapsed. A year. A whole year. 365 days of lies. Of fake smiles. Of empty kisses. Of sleeping beside someone who had already moved on behind my back. I took a step back, my chest rising and falling, my fingers trembling at my sides. My brother still hadn't said a word. Maybe because he knew. Maybe because, deep down, he understood nothing he could say would ever fix this. I turned to him, my voice hollow. "You were my brother. I trusted you. I would have done anything for you." His lips parted, his eyes glistening with something. Regret? Shame? But I didn't care. He didn't deserve my words. He didn't deserve anything. I turned back to her, the woman I thought was my wife, my partner, my future. Now, just a stranger in a room that suddenly felt too small. I took a deep breath, one last, shuddering breath. And then I walked away. I should have left right then and there. I should have turned around, slammed the door behind me, and never looked back. But I didn't, because in that moment, when the truth was out, when the lies had finally crumbled, I needed to hear what they had to say. I needed to know what kind of excuses they would come up with. What pathetic, disgusting justifications they could possibly have for stabbing me in the back. And of course, they didn't disappoint. My wife, no, not my wife. The woman I thought was my wife was the first to speak. Her face was streaked with tears, her lips trembling, her hands clutched together like some kind of helpless victim. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Sorry. I almost laughed in her face. Sorry is when you forget to pick up the groceries. Sorry is when you're late for dinner. Sorry is when you accidentally step on someone's foot. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice she had made over and over again. She took a shaky breath, wiped at her tears. It was just one time. I froze. My hands clenched in a fist at my sides. One time? One time? Did she really think I was that stupid? Did she really think I'd just accept that and move on? One time? I repeated, my voice dangerously low. So what? I just happened to catch you during the one time you decided to betray me? What are the odds of that? She swallowed hard, looking down. She couldn't even look me in the eyes. Because she knew. She knew I wasn't buying it. It didn't mean anything. She blurted out suddenly, as if that somehow made it better. I swear, it was a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. A mistake? I laughed bitterly. You don't accidentally cheat on someone. You don't just trip and fall into bed with another man. A mistake is forgetting your keys at home. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did, that was a choice. She started crying harder, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. But I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. Not after everything. And then, of course, my brother decided to speak. Look, man, he started, his voice weak, like even he knew how pathetic he sounded. I was going to tell you. I snapped my head toward him so fast he took a step back. Oh, really? I hissed. You were going to tell me? When, exactly? Before or after you fucked my wife? His mouth opened and closed, his face going pale. He had no answer, because there wasn't one. I didn't mean for this to happen, he stammered. It just got out of hand. Got out of hand? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. So what? You tripped and your tongue landed in her mouth. Your hands accidentally pulled her into your bed? It just magically spiraled out of control? He looked away, jaw tightening. You don't understand. That was it. That was my breaking point. I don't understand? I laughed, the sound hollow and sharp. Oh, I understand perfectly. I understand that the two people I trusted most, the two people I would have done anything for, betrayed me in the worst possible way. He looked like he wanted to say something, like he was scrambling for another excuse, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. I turned back to her, the woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with. Did you ever even love me? I asked. My voice was quieter now. Empty. Hollow. Her lips parted, her breath hitching. She hesitated. And in that hesitation, I got my answer. I felt something inside me shatter. Not just anger. Not just heartbreak. Something deeper. Something permanent. Because in that moment I realized I had been living a lie. Every smile, every kiss, every I love you she had ever whispered in my ear. It had all been fake. And the worst part, I had never even seen it coming. For a long moment, I just stood there, my chest rising and falling, my hands still trembling at my sides. My mind was screaming 1,000 different things, but my body felt like it was shutting down, like it had finally reached its limit. I looked at them. My wife, no, not my wife. The woman I had shared my life with, the woman I had trusted with everything, the woman who was supposed to be my future. And next to her, my own brother, the person who had been with me through every stage of my life, the one person who was supposed to have my back. And yet, here they were, together, looking at me with those wide, guilty eyes, their mouths opening and closing like they were searching for something, anything, to say that could somehow fix this. But there was nothing left to say. I let out a slow breath. My body felt empty, like all the rage, all the pain, all the betrayal had finally burned itself out, leaving only a hollow, aching void. I should have screamed more. I should have punched him. I should have broken something, thrown something, done something to make them feel even a fraction of the pain they had caused me. But I didn't, because in that moment I realized something that should have been obvious from the start. They weren't worth it. They weren't worth my anger, my energy, my pain. They weren't worth a single second more of my life. I straightened up, rolling my shoulders back. When I finally spoke, my voice was eerily calm, cold, detached. I'm done. She blinked. What? I shook my head, a bitter smile pulling at the corner of my lips. I'm done. With both of you. My brother took a step forward, his hands up like he could somehow undo this. Look, man, I cut him off with a sharp laugh. A hollow, broken sound. You think I want to hear anything from you right now? You think there's anything you could possibly say that would make this better? His jaw tightened, but he had no answer. Because there was no answer. I turned to her, the woman I had once thought I would grow old with, the woman I had built my life around. You made your choice, I said quietly. Now I'm making mine. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this." I tilted my head, genuinely stunned. "Don't do this?" I repeated. "You already did this. You did this the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you." She stepped toward me, reaching out like she wanted to touch me, to pull me back in, but I stepped away before she could. I didn't want her hands on me. Not now. Not ever again. "I love you," she choked out, her voice desperate, breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I swear I never." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Don't. Just don't." Because the truth was I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about her apologies. I didn't care about her guilt. I didn't care if she regretted it for the rest of her life. She had made her bed, and now she could lie in it. I turned without another word. I walked toward the door, my legs still shaking, my breath still uneven. But with every step I took, something inside me felt lighter, stronger, like I was finally letting go of something that had been holding me down for far too long. I reached the door, gripped the handle, and then, without looking back, I opened it and stepped out into the night. The air outside was cold, sharp. It bit at my skin, but for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I got into my car, sat there for a moment, staring at my hands on the wheel. My whole body was still buzzing, my mind still replaying every second of what had just happened. But instead of feeling broken, instead of feeling like a victim, I felt free. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I had to do. I had to move forward, without them, without the lies, without the pain dragging me down. I wasn't going to let them define me. I wasn't going to let them break me. I deserved better. And from this moment on, that's exactly what I was going to find. You'd think that was the end of the story, right? I mean, after everything that happened, after the lies, the betrayal, the complete destruction of the life I thought I had, you'd think there was no way they'd have the audacity to come back. But life is full of surprises, and sometimes it throws you a twist you never see coming. A month. That's how long it took. 1 month after I walked out of that apartment, 1 month after I cut them both out of my life, I was finally starting to feel like myself again. It wasn't easy. Every day was a battle. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. Some days I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text her, forgetting for just a split second that she wasn't that person anymore, that she never really was. But slowly I began to rebuild. I started focusing on me. I went to the gym, took up hobbies I'd been neglecting for years. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in ages, people who had been there for me when I didn't even realize I needed them. I was healing, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was okay. And then she showed up. It was a Sunday morning. I remember because I had just come back from a run, sweat still dripping down my face, music blasting in my headphones. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I saw a shadow move past my front window, I froze. My first thought was that maybe it was a package delivery. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a delivery driver. It was her. She looked different, disheveled, exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messy, pulled back into a loose bun, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying, probably for a while. She was clutching a small bag in one hand, and in the other, she held something that made my stomach drop, a photo of us. From better days. I stood there for a moment, just staring at her. Part of me thought I was imagining things, that maybe I was hallucinating from exhaustion. But no, she was real. She was actually standing there. "Hey," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mind was racing, my body locked in place. Why was she here? What did she want? And more importantly, why did I still feel that familiar ache in my chest when I looked at her? Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I used to know, the woman I had once loved, but I shook that thought away. I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't going to fall for it. What do you want? I finally managed, my voice cold, detached. I didn't have the energy for anything else. She flinched, as if the words physically hurt her. She looked down, biting her lip. I need to say I'm sorry. You already said that, I said flatly. Multiple times. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. But I mean it. I messed up. I ruined everything. And I've been thinking about it every day since you left. I can't do this without you. I let out a bitter laugh. You seem to be doing just fine with my brother. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. It was a mistake. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I was stupid. I wasn't thinking. I was broken. But I know that doesn't excuse it. I just want another chance. Please. Another chance. That's what she was asking for. Another chance. After everything she had done. After all the pain, the lies, the betrayal, she thought I would just forgive her. That I would open the door and welcome her back into my life like nothing had happened. Please, she whispered again, her voice raw. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance to make things right. She fell to her knees right there on my doorstep, clutching the photo in her hands, sobbing. And for a moment, just for a moment, I felt something. Not forgiveness, not sympathy, but closure. Because in that moment, I realized something. I'd already moved on. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need any of it. But here's the craziest part. You won't believe what I did next. But before I tell you, I want to hear from you. What would you do in my place? Would you ever forgive them? Could you ever trust someone again after a betrayal like that? Let me know in the comments, because trust me, this story isn't over yet.